Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another forecast discussion. On the road today, so you might hear some stuff in the background, but wanted to do a forecast video today. We've got a kind of bimodal severe weather event. We have an enhanced risk up for parts of northern Iowa into southeast Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Then a separate area of slight risk here extending from basically southwest Missouri all the way east toward the eastern seaboard. There is going to be a tornado threat with both of these regimes, 5% here up for that enhanced risk area, as well as down here from kind of southwest Missouri towards southern Illinois, there in that southern risk area. Damaging winds also going to be a threat, as well as large hail, potentially significant hail up here, particularly in the enhanced risk area across northern Iowa into southeast Minnesota and western Wisconsin. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to talk about both of these areas in this video and try to break down what's going on in each area. So let's look at first our water vapor satellite imagery, and you can see we've got a nice looking satellite image here. We've got a nice trough here across the Pacific Northwest. It's moved kind of inland a little bit. You can actually just see the defluence aloft here from the water vapor imagery. These clouds kind of flowing toward the northwest up here across Montana and North Dakota, and then kind of toward the east as you go south within the base of that trough. So very nice defluence aloft here with this kind of swirl you see up there across western Canada. We have a very large complex of storms that's ongoing across parts of Missouri right now, and that is going to be actually the main driver for today's severe threat in that region. The MCV that's going to result from this complex is going to be the main forcing mechanism for storms down there. So very interesting water vapor imagery. And we look at the satellite imagery, and I zoom in here to this complex of storms down here across Missouri, you can see the swirl on the backside of this sort of decaying MCS. You can really see it very well defined here across maybe southeast Kansas, northeast Oklahoma, behind the main band of convection here. That's going to be the main forcing mechanism here as it moves eastward across southern Missouri today. And if we pull up the radar imagery, you can just see it beautifully here. Very nice swirl. Almost looks like a land hurricane of sorts there across southeast Kansas. That is going to allow wind fields to strengthen out ahead of it and going to provide the forcing mechanism for renewed convective development ahead of it today across mostly southern or south central Missouri, moving eastward into southern Illinois. So let's go ahead and look at the surface map here. We'll start kind of down here in the southern target. You can see we have already a decent plume of moisture here in place across southern Missouri. We've got upper 60s, mid to upper 60s dew points here across most of the region here with southeasterly winds. Surface flow a little bit weak now, but winds should strengthen in response to that MCV as it moves off to the east. As we go up north, we do have a plume of moisture here up into southern Iowa. We have actually upper 70s dew points reading here in southwest Iowa. I do think those are erroneous. We did have this issue back last week with the severe weather event up here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. I do think these stations are inaccurate. We can see the surrounding stations we see 61 here, Des Moines 71 over 61 here. But we do have a nice plume of low to mid 60s dew points kind of hovering near the Missouri-Iowa border, and some mid 60s dew points here into southeast Nebraska. These should get pulled northward as that surface low strengthens out to the west. You can kind of see the flow out here, somewhat of a cyclonic signature there. Actually, I think the surface low may be a little bit farther back out to the west here. If I can get this to load. Yeah, so you can see, I believe the surface low is out here somewhere in Nebraska. If we look at our mesoanalysis data, we can get a little bit better picture. And so kind of an elongated surface low here. You can see it's kind of centered here across the Nebraska-South Dakota border. Cyclonic flow around that. That's going to consolidate, strengthen, and move off toward the east or east-northeast as the day progresses today. That's going to help strengthen those low-level wind fields, help back the winds here across southern Minnesota, western Wisconsin. That moisture should get drawn northward decently as the day progresses here for the northern target. Farther south, kind of a chaotic surface pattern here. We don't see a whole lot of surface features here. We do see this kind of MCV here, some evidence of that in the surface flow. A little bit of a trough here across southeast Kansas behind that early day MCS. So if we go up in the atmosphere, we can actually see it quite a bit better. This sort of little kink in the height contours here, that's our MCV. And, it's completely convectively enhanced. This is not a sort of trough that's coming off the Pacific like we see up here in the Pacific Northwest. It's going to impact our northern severe threat today. It's just completely convectively enhanced by that MCS and resultant MCV. So little potent shortwave here associated with that MCV is going to help things out in the southern target. We go down to, let's go down to 850 millibars here. We can see how our low-level jet is doing. SPC having a little bit of trouble this morning with these images, but you can see we do have a nice low-level jet in place across the southern plains, basically Arkansas southwestward into East Texas, then a little bit of a plume of 30, 35 plus knot winds here across the central plains. These winds are out of the southwest, so that's always a little bit concerning that some dry air may filter into the low levels here, but we'll continue to monitor that. Let's actually take a look at some soundings here and see what we're seeing. Let's go up to Omaha. Not a whole lot of dry air in place at this point. We do have steep lapse rates aloft, quite a bit of instability already in place, low-level inversion in place as well. So this is a decent-looking profile here. Again, we're going to have to watch these kind of low levels to see if they do dry out a little bit, given that southwesterly low-level jet today. But again, large instability in place that should help things today. Let's go to Davenport, Iowa. Much of the same, not quite as much instability already in place, but a decent plume of moisture, decently moist profile. Dew points only at 59 here at Davenport, so not bad, but again, that moisture should get pulled northward for at least low to maybe mid-60s dew points here across southern Minnesota, western Wisconsin later today. Down here across the southern target area, this is at Springfield, Missouri. Lots of instability already in place ahead of that MCS. It's what's helping fuel that ongoing MCS as it moves across Missouri. But ample instability here, deep moisture throughout the entire profile. Wind profiles here not looking super organized yet. However, that should change as that MCV moves off toward the east. Would already expect to see some enhancement of the low-level winds and at least the deep layer winds as that MCV is now across southeastern Kansas, just west of this site. So would expect that the wind profiles are a little bit better right now and should continue to get better throughout the day. So let's go ahead and take a look at some model data. This is going to be the 12Z NAM that's coming in right now. So you can see both target areas, our main kind of closed trough feature up here across southern and sort of western Canada, with that plume of very strong winds aloft surrounding the base of that trough. That's going to be our main forcing mechanism for today. And you see that little convectively enhanced vorticity maximum down there across southern Kansas and Oklahoma here. So we run through the day a little bit. You can see, so up here in Minnesota, we've got this kind of initial little plume of stronger winds aloft, maybe a little bit of a weak shortwave there. Going to have to watch that for storm development out here today across during the late morning and early afternoon hours across the target area. This may be a fly in the ointment for the target up here today, but we'll show you some of the cams here in a second. Cams are not super gung-ho about lots of convection here, so not overly concerned that it's going to ruin the day from a chasing perspective up here into southeast Minnesota, but something to watch for sure. Then down here across the southern target, that MCV, that convectively enhanced kind of trough there, is going to be located somewhere across southwest Missouri by about 18Z, 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And as we move along, we see a little bit very well defined there, even a closed contour showing up here with that southern mode there across southern to eastern Missouri. So storms should form out ahead of that. And again, with an MCV event, you want to favor the northeast quadrant. So if we have our MCV here and it's moving basically due east, we want to be in the northeast quadrant of that to see our best chance at tornado. So the northeast quadrant probably would encompass somewhere south central to eastern Missouri into far southern Illinois. Just going to have to watch the placement of that throughout the day for the best chances for a tornado threat. Then up here you can see beautiful defluence aloft here moving into central Minnesota by this evening. This is at 0Z, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Beautiful defluence aloft there. Should enhance rising motion across the target area and allow storms to fire basically along the warm front. If we go to our surface map here, the warm front's going to be a major player for today. You can see that surface low consolidate out here across Nebraska, South Dakota. We get kind of a lobe of that to move off to the east into southern Minnesota. Very well-defined warm front here. You can see the pressure tongue there in the isobars. So wherever that warm front is where chasers are going to want to be today. That's where low-level shear is going to be enhanced, and the best chance for tornadoes is going to be. Now, the fly in the ointment, another fly in the ointment is going to be this MCS down here in Missouri. We typically would think, these kind of mid-60s to upper 60s dew points are going to have no problem making their way northward. Well, this MCS is already ongoing across Missouri, and that's going to do some damage to the low-level moisture fields here. It's going to kind of eat up that moisture here across central and eastern Missouri, which normally would be able to make its way northward, given that strong surface low out here across Nebraska and South Dakota. So that's probably not going to be the case. However, we do have, again, mid-60s dew points here in southeast Nebraska, low to mid-60s here across kind of that Missouri-Iowa border region. So I do think that's going to be enough for a severe threat today. That may temper the tornado threat a little bit, especially if temperatures rise into the low to mid-80s. Going to be right on the verge of temperature dew point spreads being too high for tornadoes here along the warm front. We may get a little bit of moisture pooling along that warm front. As does happen quite often, you get a little bit higher dew points right along the frontal zone as they kind of pool along that wind shift. So we'll have to watch that for sure. These mid-60s dew points can make it up into southern Minnesota, which I think is very, very plausible once that surface low moves off to the east and low-level winds strengthen. I do think that is plausible, and that may enhance the tornado threat a little bit, but something that's going to have to be monitored today for sure. So let's go ahead and zoom in here, take a look at some soundings from both target areas. We'll kind of zoom in here to the Central Plains sector. We can kind of get a look at both. So this is the dew point map. This is the NAM. NAM is a little bit aggressive with the moisture here getting up toward the north. You can see kind of low to mid 60s dew points. Actually, I think that's fairly plausible. This is a decent representation of what the moisture is looking like this morning. And you can see the well-defined warm front here ahead of the surface low. Let's take a sounding here. We'll do it right at kind of the Albert Lee area of southern Minnesota. And we'll see what this is showing. Would expect to see a high instability, and that's a very impressive wind profile there. Large low-level shear as photographs are enhanced right along that warm front. A little bit of convective contamination here, but not too much to worry about at this point. The NAM showing 78 degrees over 65 here along the warm front. I do think we will get a little bit warmer than that today across southern Minnesota. Something in the low to mid 80s. So if we can get those 65-degree dew points up into southern Minnesota, southeast Minnesota particularly, I do think the tornado threat will definitely be there right along that warm front. Given these very large low-level photographs here, strong, impressive curvature in that low-level photograph. So any right-moving supercell in this environment would have the opportunity to produce tornadoes. So interesting setup up there along the warm front. Again, I think the warm front is where the best tornado threat is going to reside. You'll notice if we go down just south of that warm front across the warm sector there across northern Iowa, photographs not nearly as large and impressive. Still strong instability, large hail threat given steep lapse rates aloft in this enhanced risk area, but photographs not nearly as large in the low levels as they are kind of confined to that warm frontal zone. So chasers up here are going to want to definitely find that warm front and stick to it for any storm that may interact and ride that warm front. So NAM definitely showing a little bit better moisture return toward the north, a little bit stronger. You can kind of see that hole across eastern Iowa. That's kind of that meager moisture being pulled northward. And also mixing is going to be a concern today, I think. Not kind of a weak cap in place on these on the soundings we were viewing this morning. Not a whole lot of cap here. There is a little bit of that low-level inversion, but shouldn't take too much to bust through that cap this afternoon. So mixing should be an issue, given a little bit weaker cap, given we should see a decent amount of clearing out here across this enhanced risk area. You can kind of look at the visible satellite here once again. And we do have quite a bit of clearing out here already across southern Minnesota. Some showers here maybe across northern Iowa this morning with some high-level clouds moving in. So that may temper mixing a little bit, but mixing does need to be taken into account today, that dew points may dip just a little bit if we get sunshine in the afternoon hours. So I think low to maybe mid-60s dew points again up here. If we can get to mid-60s dew points, 64, 65, I think the tornado threat will be much, much greater, given that spreads may be just within that kind of 20-degree dew point spread range that we kind of use as a rule of thumb for forecasting tornadoes. Southern target, let me change sectors here real quick. We can actually use the float sector here today. So you can see very ample moisture here across the southern target area, dew points in the 70s. And again, right ahead of that MCV track is going to be the most favorable place for tornadic supercells. So this is going to be kind of your MCV location. So we'd want to be kind of, again, in that northeast quadrant, just out ahead, the northeast side of that MCV. So somewhere up here in east central Missouri, you can see very large instability here with this setup, almost 4,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE. But photograph's a little bit wonky here for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe let's go a little bit farther south. This may be maybe going a little bit too far east of the actual MCV track. And there's a little bit better, a little bit more curvature in the low levels. This is at 18Z. Again, I think given the MCV's proximity to this region, I think the storms may fire out here fairly early. If we go down to Springfield, again, not a whole bunch of cap, not a whole lot of cap remaining here. This was at 7 a.m. So I think storms should go pretty early in this southern target area. Decent curvature in the low-level photographs, ample deep layer shear enhanced by that mesoscale convective vortex with ample instability should favor supercells with all severe hazards as they move off toward the east, just ahead of that MCV. So let's take a look at some CAM data here. This is the 12Z HER. We'll take a look here. You can kind of see both target areas here. We'll kind of focus in on our northern target first. So you can see that early shortwave does fire off some showers and storms here across southeast Minnesota into Wisconsin, but clearing after that should be sufficient to destabilize the atmosphere enough to get storms along that warm front. You do see by 0Z, this is 7 p.m., we do get some attempts at storms right along that warm front. Some supercells within this line. Again, we'll have to watch the temperature dew point spreads. I do like to look at the HER moisture fields here. This may give us a nicer, higher resolution look at the moisture fields up here. And you can see pretty decent already, low 60s, kind of patchwork low 60s dew points here across southern Iowa, northern Missouri. The HER does advect those northward a little bit. Again, you can see evidence of that moisture pooling right along that front with kind of upper 50s to very low 60s dew points here right along that frontal zone. So moisture a little bit more meager here in this northern target on the HER. But again, the HER does like to overmix things. It takes mixing a little bit to the extreme. So I think somewhere in between the NAM and the HER is going to be what we're going to see. Probably low 60s dew points, 61, 62, I think is a decent bet right along that warm front. And you can see that the storms do fire along that warm front. And again, that's where the highest low-level shear is going to reside. So, yep, some supercells there along the warm front into southeast Minnesota, far western Wisconsin this afternoon and evening. Let's go down to our southern threat here. I'm going to change sectors here. Actually, let me do the Midwest sector. That might be the Ohio Valley sector. Yep, it's a little bit better. So let's go ahead and see. You can see the storms ongoing, the showers and storms ongoing with that MCV this morning, going to persist. This is interesting. This is at 19Z. Storms kind of fire well back to the west here, kind of closer to the Springfield area. And if we look at, so this is at 19Z. So let's look at 500, see where that MCV is located at 19Z. And I have a sneaking suspicion that these storms are firing kind of well back to the west, kind of within the MCV itself. And, that's not, I don't know if that's the best as far as a tornado threat goes. So this is at 19Z, and you can see the axis of that kind of convectively enhanced trough. The storms are firing back in here, which is a little bit odd. You would expect storm development to be out in here, out in the exit region of the trough, northeast quadrant of that MCV. But they're firing back in here, at least on this HRRR model run, which, number one, is back in kind of rougher terrain from a chase perspective. But number two, the overall shear, the low-level shear, going to be, I think, minimized in this kind of entrance region near the core of this trough. Out in here, we would expect to see much larger photographs, much better chances for tornadic supercells, but a very interesting progression here from the HUR. You can see that swirl. Kind of the core of the swirl, if you kind of extrapolate it out, would be kind of right in here. And the storms are firing on the backside. So interesting thing from the HUR here, firing these storms on the backside. And let's take a sounding out here, just out ahead of these. This is at 22Z. We'll take one just to the southeast of these storms. And again, this is the HUR. Don't take this literally. This is just a guess at what the radar might look like. So HUR is actually depicting a decent wind profile here, even though the storms may be a little bit farther back than I would expect normally. Large instability, steep lapse rates aloft, large hail, definitely a threat. And with this photograph, I do think tornadoes would be a threat. So something to watch, just maybe a little bit of a quirk of the HUR. But usually you'd want to see storms kind of out in this region of the MCV, just out to the northeast of the center. HUR instead firing storms well back to the west and then moving them off to the east, kind of getting clustered as the day progresses. Let's take a look at a couple more cams here. We'll take a look at the ARW. We'll start here with this southern mode. You can see that MCV swirling off toward the east, and ample storm coverage here across east central to southern Missouri, and then out ahead, that kind of early day stuff re-intensifies later on into southern Illinois as the afternoon progresses. Kind of a more messy mode here on the ARW, more of a linear, clustered mode there. But something to note, that decent amount of convection is firing with that MCV. Then up in the northern target, we do get a couple supercells, a supercell or two to fire. Wow, this is a very potent solution here. Basically, one supercell firing out here stays discrete for a couple of hours, kind of near the Rochester area. Very solid looking solution up here for that warm front target. This would absolutely ride the warm front. These soundings probably are not accurate here. Never really look at the soundings here on these ARW and NSSL WRF cams, but this would definitely be riding the warm front, and then eventually kind of clusters out into a kind of broken line of storms there along that warm front. NSSL WRF, just for kicks here, one more cam to show you. We'll start again now with the northern setup. And storms, wow, potent solution here as well. Couple supercells fire here about 21Z, 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And kind of stay semi-discrete for a little bit, right along that warm front. And then eventually things get a little bit more messy along that warm front. Storms fire along the kind of the extent of that front there across southern Minnesota into Iowa. Quickly, we'll move down south here into our southern target area. And you can see where that MCV is located, kind of southwest Missouri there. Kind of a messy mode here in the southern target, but does fire supercells, it looks like, here by about 19Z, 1 to 2 p.m. I think here, just ahead of that MCV. Again, the favored location for tornadic supercells there. So all in all, a decent looking severe threat for both areas here. I do think all hazards are in play in both areas. Storm mode may be a little bit of a concern down here. Some of the cams showing a little bit higher storm coverage down here near that MCV, but of course northeast quadrant does favor tornadic supercells, so we'll have to watch that closely. Up in here, again, I think moisture is going to be a little bit of a concern today if spreads get approaching that 20 degree or exceed that 20 degree dew point spread kind of threshold. We may get a tempered tornado threat, more of a large hail and damaging wind threat up here, but tornado threat is definitely apparent up here if we can get a little bit better moisture there to pool along that warm front. So that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.